Usually, when we talk about a sporting miracle, right, we throw around the word underdog with a pretty loose definition.
Yeah, we really do.
Like a low-seeded team strings together a few lucky wins, or maybe a wild card squad gets hot at the right time and steals the championship. And, I mean, we inherently love those stories.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone loves a Cinderella story.
Right. But I want you to completely reset your definition of an underdog for a second, because the scale of what we are looking at today, it fundamentally breaks the math of international sports.
It really does. The numbers just shouldn't work.
Exactly. So I want you to picture a tiny island in the Southern Caribbean, white sand beaches, turquoise water, like the kind of place you see on a travel brochure.
Sounds pretty nice right about now.
Right. But this island has a population of roughly 156,000 to 158,000 people.
Which is tiny.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, there are college football stadiums in the United States that hold almost that many people on a Saturday afternoon. And the total land area is just 171 square miles.
Yeah, so geographically and demographically, I mean, it is just a microscopic speck on the global footballing map.
Exactly.
You're talking about a talent pool so small that, statistically speaking, producing a single world-class athlete is an anomaly, let alone an entire starting 11 capable of competing on the global stage.
And yet, this tiny island has just done the absolute impossible. They have officially surpassed Iceland to become the smallest nation by both population and land area to ever qualify for a FIFA World Cup.
It's honestly still hard to wrap my head around.
I know, right? We are talking about the 2026 World Cup debut of the Curaçao national football team.
The Blue Wave.
Yeah, affectionately known back home as the Blue Wave or the Blue Family. So the mission of this deep dive is to unpack the mechanics of this miracle.
Because it definitely wasn't just luck.
No, definitely not. We have this massive stack of sources in front of us today, ranging from, really granular tactical analyses and sports betting odds to FIFA profiles, geopolitical histories, and official squad announcements.
Right, and none of those sources point to this being just a fluke.
Exactly. We are going to figure out exactly how this tiny island engineered a highly sophisticated footballing triumph and what their survival strategy looks like as they head into an absolutely brutal Group E against Germany, Ecuador, and Ivory Coast.
Yeah, it's the ultimate David versus Goliath narrative. But what the underlying data reveals is that this wasn't magic.
Right.
It wasn't just a group of local guys getting lucky bounces on a Sunday afternoon. This qualification was the result of a highly calculated geopolitical and tactical masterclass that has been, meticulously constructed over the last decade.
I mean, it's a structural triumph of resource management just as much as a sporting victory, because when I first looked at the population data, the math just didn't add up for me.
Yeah, how could it?
Right. A decade ago, Curaçao was ranked 150th in the FIFA World Rankings. They were essentially a rounding error in the global football conversation.
Yeah.
But today, they are ranked 82nd, and they're packing their bags for the biggest sporting event on Earth. You can't just farm a world-class 26-man roster from a talent pool of 150,000 people.
No, you really can't.
So I had to dig into the Federation's constitutional status to find the answer. And it turns out they aren't purely pulling from the island at all, right? The entire foundation of this team rests on a constitutional shift that happened back in 2010.
That is the critical turning point. What's fascinating here is that to understand the modern Curaçao national team, you have to look at their unique geopolitical status.
Right.
They are an autonomous constituent country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So prior to October 2010, they were part of the Netherlands Antilles, which was a political entity that combined several Caribbean islands.
Like Bonaire, Saint Eustache.
Yeah, Saba, St. Martin, exactly. But when the Netherlands Antilles was formally dissolved as a unified political body, Curaçao essentially inherited the institutional mantle.
Meaning they became the official footballing successor.
Right. Both FIFA and CONCACAF recognized the local federation, the FFK, as the direct inheritor of that footballing history, which meant they kept their membership and voting rights, but more importantly, they gained total autonomy over their sporting direction.
Right, and I was tracing the timeline in the Federation's history. Inheriting that status is one thing, but translating a 2010 constitutional change into a 2026 World Cup appearance requires, well, actual players.
Exactly, you need talent.
And the FFK realized they had access to a resource that almost no other small Caribbean nation has. Because of the deep migratory ties between Willemstad, which is the capital of Curaçao, and Amsterdam, there is this massive diaspora.
A huge one, yeah.
So the Federation essentially looked at the map and executed a brilliant, hyper-targeted recruitment model. They didn't just try to build academies on the island. They went directly after Dutch-raised players of Curaçao descent.
Yeah, and we're talking about elite athletes here. Guys who grew up in the Netherlands, carrying Dutch passports, but who are entirely eligible to represent Curaçao through their parents or grandparents.
It's just wild. The squad demographic breakdown is arguably the most mind-bending statistic in our entire stack of research.
Oh, without a doubt.
Of the 26 players on the official World Cup roster heading to North America, 25 of them were born in the Netherlands.
25.
25 out of 26. That is 96% of your roster born an ocean away from the island they represent.
And it isn't just about where they were born. That's about where they were educated. These players didn't just play recreational football in Europe. They were incubated inside elite Dutch Eredivisie academies.
We're talking places like PSV Eindhoven, Ajax, Feyenoord.
Exactly. The Dutch development system, which is historically rooted in the philosophy of total football, is world-renowned for producing a very specific profile of player.
Right.
They're technically immaculate, they're tactically intelligent, and they possess this profound understanding of spatial awareness. The Dutch system teaches players from the age of 8 how to operate within a fluid 4-3-3 structure, how to manipulate space, and how to execute precise passing triangles under pressure.
So Curaçao effectively inherited a squad where every single player speaks the exact same tactical language.
Precisely.
It reminds me of a scrappy, underfunded tech startup suddenly discovering they have full legal access to a Fortune 500 company's multi-billion-dollar R&D department.
That's a great analogy.
Like, you get all the proprietary technology without having to pay for the initial research and development. But looking at this from a sustainability standpoint, is this just a loophole or is this a legitimate, brilliant strategy?
Well, the sustainability question is highly debated within international football circles.
I bet.
However, the structural bridge they've built is actually highly resilient in the medium term. What's fascinating here is that the diaspora model establishes a baseline of elite European technical standards within the national team setup.
Right.
When these Dutch-trained players come into the Curaçao camp, they bring that elite professionalism, dietary rigor, and tactical discipline with them. It elevates the entire standard of the federation.
That makes a lot of sense.
And furthermore, by qualifying for the World Cup, the FFK secures a massive injection of FIFA prize money. We're talking millions of dollars. The long-term vision is to use the success of this diaspora-heavy squad to fund the grassroots infrastructure on the island itself.
So it's a catalyst mechanism. You use the European talent to secure the capital, which you then invest locally so that 20 years from now, you are actually producing homegrown talent.
Exactly. You're combining the world-class technical education of Amsterdam with the deep, passionate cultural heritage of Willemstad.
Okay, but having a roster full of Eredivisie graduates doesn't automatically translate to international dominance. I mean, you can have all the technically gifted players in the world, but if the tactical application is flawed or if the dressing room fractures, the talent means nothing.
Absolutely nothing, yeah.
And this leads us directly into the qualification gauntlet. Because while the product on the pitch during the CONCACAF qualifiers was, frankly, nothing short of a masterpiece, the situation on the managerial sidelines was an absolute pressure cooker of chaos.
Yeah, the contrast between their on-field execution and their off-field instability is honestly one of the most compelling aspects of this narrative.
Right.
Because navigating a CONCACAF qualifying campaign is notoriously brutal. You're dealing with extreme travel demands, varying climates, hostile away environments, and, deeply physical opponents. Yet mathematically, their run was impeccable.
I mean, impeccable almost undersells it. I combed through the match logs from their qualifying run, and the numbers are just staggering.
They really are.
10 matches played across the early and final rounds. 7 wins, 3 draws, and 0 losses. They scored 28 goals and conceded only 5.
A plus 23 goal difference.
Yeah. They didn't just scrape by, they steamrolled teams. I'm looking at massive statement victories. There was a 4-1 victory against Barbados, where the forward, Rangel Ajanga, scored a brilliant hat-trick.
Right.
then a highly professional 5-1 dismantling away at Haiti, which is always a very difficult environment, and then a 7-0 absolute destruction of Bermuda, where they literally looked like they were running a training drill.
Yeah, the underlying metrics of those matches reveal a team operating at a completely different technical level than their regional peers. I mean, they were dominating possession, averaging over 56% of the ball across the campaign.
Wow.
And generating over 6 shots on target per game. They dictated the tempo of every single match. The Dutch Academy pedigree was glaringly obvious. When an opponent tried to press them, the Curaçaoan center backs simply used their superior passing range to bypass the pressure.
And when teams sat deep,
They used precise, rhythmic ball circulation to stretch the defensive blocks until gaps appeared.
Okay, let's unpack this, though. Because while the players are putting on an offensive showcase on the field, the situation with the coaching staff is deteriorating into a full-blown crisis.
It really was.
The architect of this dominant run is Dick Advocaat. Now, for some context, Advocaat is a legendary figure in Dutch football management. He is 78 years old, which officially makes him the oldest coach in World Cup history.
An incredible milestone on its own.
Right. He's managed the Netherlands national team multiple times, South Korea, PSV, Rangers, Sunderland. Like, he has literally seen every conceivable scenario in professional football. But then in February 2026, just 4 months before the start of the World Cup, Advocaat unexpectedly resigns.
And the timing of that sent shockwaves through the Federation. The official sources confirmed that his resignation was strictly due to deeply personal reasons. Specifically, his daughter fell severely ill.
Oh.
Yeah, and given his age and his priorities, he recognized that he just couldn't provide the obsessive 24/7 focus required to prepare a team for a World Cup while managing a family medical crisis.
Which is a completely understandable human decision.
Of course, but purely from a sporting perspective, it left the Federation in absolute freefall.
Right, because the FFK had to scramble. You have 4 months until you play Germany, and you don't have a manager. So they bring in Fred Rutten, another highly experienced Dutch coach.
Yeah.
And on paper, it seems logical, right? Keep the Dutch connection, bring in a guy who understands the Eredivisie mindset. But the actual execution was a disaster. Rutten takes over, and he manages 2 friendlies in March 2026. I watched the tape of those matches, and it was jarring.
It was incredibly tough to watch.
They lose 2-0 to China, looking completely disjointed, and then they get absolutely thrashed 5-1 by Australia. But the results weren't even the worst part. The internal sources indicate there was a massive player revolt brewing.
Yes, and the mechanics of that player revolt are fascinating because it really highlights the fragility of tactical transitions.
How so?
Well, Dick Advocaat had built a system predicated on deep trust and pragmatic risk management. He allowed the players a certain degree of freedom in possession, but the defensive structure was non-negotiable and highly conservative.
Right.
Then Fred Rutten comes into the dressing room in March and immediately attempts to impose his own philosophy. He tried to push the defensive line significantly higher up the pitch, attempting to implement a much more aggressive counter-pressing system.
And against Australia, you saw exactly why that was a disaster. The Australian forwards, who have great vertical pace, simply kept dropping the ball into the massive pockets of space behind Curaçao's newly elevated defensive line.
Exactly.
The center backs looked terrified because they were suddenly being asked to defend 50 yards of open grass behind them, which is something Advocaat had explicitly protected them from doing.
Precisely. The tactical misalignment was immediate. The players, who had just spent 2 years perfecting a specific method of survival under Advocaat, felt completely exposed.
Yeah, you could see it in their body language.
Right. They pushed back against Rutten's instructions, arguing that a high line against elite World Cup opposition would be suicidal. And when players stop believing in the tactical blueprint, the intensity drops, the rotations fail, and, well, you get thrashed 5-1 by Australia.
And as if a tactical crisis wasn't enough, we have to talk about the corporate leverage involved here. Because the reports show that Curaçao's main sponsor, a Dutch airline and travel company named Corendon, started applying immense pressure on the Federation.
This is where the business side really collides with the sport.
Exactly. Corendon isn't just throwing their logo on a training kit. They physically run the flight routes from Amsterdam to Willemstad. They practically underwrite the logistical bridge that makes this entire diaspora team possible.
They're essential to the operation.
Right. Their branding is deeply tied to the success and positive image of this national team. So when the team starts collapsing in friendlies and the dressing room turns toxic, the sponsor demands intervention.
The confluence of player dissatisfaction and commercial pressure created a completely untenable environment for Rutten. The Federation was staring down the barrel of an international embarrassment on the biggest stage imaginable.
So in May 2026, literally weeks before the tournament kicks off, the stars align in the most dramatic way possible. Advocate Stodder's health thankfully improves. The Federation essentially forces Rutten out, and Advocate makes this triumphant cinematic return to the dugout to reclaim his team.
Like something out of a movie.
It really is an incredible story. But let me push back here, strictly looking at the sporting implications. Changing your manager, changing the tactical philosophy, changing the manager again, and reverting back to the old philosophy all within a 90-day window right before a World Cup. Doesn't that usually spell absolute disaster for squad discipline?
Oh, in almost any traditional footballing context, such volatility would destroy squad cohesion. You typically require a minimum of 12 to 18 months of unbroken continuity heading into a major tournament just to drill the defensive automatisms and set-piece routines.
Exactly. So how does that work here?
Because Dick Advocate's return operates under a different psychological paradigm. His reappointment was the only mechanism that could have stabilized the squad.
But how does an incoming manager, even a returning one, instantly repair a fractured dressing room with only a few weeks of training camp left?
By providing an immediate psychological safety net. When Advocate walked back into that dressing room, he didn't need to teach them a new system. He simply reinstated the pragmatic, veteran-focused structure that had successfully navigated them through the qualifiers.
Oh, I see.
Look closely at the final match of their qualifying group against Jamaica. They needed a result to officially punch their ticket. The pressure was suffocating. Advocate set up a brilliant, risk-averse structure that absorbed the Jamaican attacks without breaking, and they secured a 0-0 draw.
He's just a master of tension management.
Exactly. The players trust him implicitly because his system has empirically proven to keep them safe under pressure.
Yeah.
At 78, Advocate has zero ego left regarding playing, beautiful football. He is purely focused on survival mathematics. His return signaled to the players, we're going back to what keeps us alive.
Yeah, that structural trust is paramount, especially when you are sailing into the kind of storm they are about to face. But as we know, a manager's brilliant tactical blueprint is ultimately just ink on paper unless you have the right personnel to execute it on the grass.
Very true.
To truly understand how this blue wave operates mechanically, we need to transition from the touchline to the pitch. When I was cross-referencing the squad list with their domestic club minutes, a very clear hierarchy emerged. The spine of this team is anchored by a core of heavily battle-tested veterans.
The reliance on experience is a hallmark of Advocate's methodology. He fundamentally prioritizes players who have accumulated thousands of minutes in high-stakes environments over unproven potential.
Right. Let's look at the defensive anchor. In goal, you have Eloy Room. He is 37 years old, currently playing for Miami FC in the USL Championship, though a lot of North American fans will probably recognize him from his highly successful stint with the Columbus Crew in MLS, where he won an MLS Cup.
He's had a fantastic career.
Yeah, and he has 71 caps for the national team. His shot-stopping mechanics are incredibly explosive for a keeper of his age, but his real value is his command of the penalty area. Like, he is constantly organizing the defensive line, shouting adjustments, and managing the emotional temperature of the back four.
And a veteran goalkeeper is the most critical asset for a team expecting to face a high volume of shots. Room's ability to read the trajectory of crosses and manage the tempo of the game.
Knowing when to slow things down.
Exactly. Knowing exactly when to slow down a goal kick to give his defenders a breather, it's invaluable.
Now, sharing that record of 71 international caps is the captain, Leandro Bacuna. He's 34 years old, currently playing in Turkey for İzmir FK. But he spent years navigating the intense physicality of the English Premier League and the Championship with clubs like Aston Villa and Cardiff City.
You've seen it all.
Right. He is the emotional leader, the creative anchor, and he scored 16 goals for the national team. And directly alongside him in the midfield is his younger brother, Juninho Bacuna.
The Bacuna brothers are really the operational heart of the Curaçaoan system. Juninho operates as a traditional box-to-box midfielder. He possesses a remarkable engine.
Yeah, he never stops running.
He is the player tasked with winning the physical duels in the center of the pitch, recovering second balls, and instantly initiating the transition phase. Furthermore, Juninho is an absolute specialist when it comes to dead ball situations.
His free kicks are terrifying.
His delivery on corners and wide free kicks is incredibly flat and driven, which makes it a nightmare for opposing goalkeepers to judge.
When I was reviewing the heat maps and passing networks from the qualifiers, the Bacuna brothers stood out immediately. It's like they are essentially the timing belt and the alternator of a classic car.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. They might not be the glossy paint job or the shiny chrome rims that catch all the media's attention, but if those two specific components fail to synchronize, the entire vehicle breaks down on the side of the road. Their physical efficiency dictates whether the team can sustain any meaningful possession.
That mechanical analogy is highly accurate. They provide the grit and the rotational stability. But to ensure the Bacunas aren't overwhelmed by superior numbers in midfield, Advocate relies heavily on a younger player who has quickly become the structural linchpin of the side, and that's Livano Comenencia.
Comenencia's profile is so fascinating. He's only 22 years old, currently plying his trade for FC Zurich in the Swiss Super League, but his developmental pedigree is elite. I mean, he spent 9 formative years in the PSV Eindhoven Academy and even had a stint developing within the Juventus system in Italy.
And Comenencia operates as the single pivot, right? The defensive screen sitting directly in front of the center backs. His role requires immense spatial intelligence.
Because he has to read the game so quickly?
Yes. He is constantly scanning over his shoulder, identifying where the opponent's attacking midfielders are drifting, and subtly adjusting his positioning to block passing lanes into the penalty area.
Right.
By taking on the burden of sweeping up the space between the midfield and defensive lines, Comenencia provides Leandro and Juninho Bacuna the tactical freedom to step forward and engage the opponent higher up the pitch.
And he clearly grasps the emotional magnitude of what this team has achieved.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic quote from him in the post-qualification materials. Reflecting on the final whistle that secured their World Cup spot, he said, "I cried so much, there were no tears left. We've got real quality and excellent technique. We're going to surprise a lot of people."
You can just hear the blend of raw relief and defiant confidence. He knows they are structurally sound. And that defensive solidity provided by Comenencia is what allows Curaçao to utilize their absolute wild card. Because when you spend the majority of a match defending, you need an offensive release valve. You need a player who can instantly transition the team from a defensive posture to an attacking threat.
Right. You need an out ball.
Exactly. And that player is Tahith Chong.
Tahith Chong has the most unique narrative on the entire roster. He's currently a winger for Sheffield United in England, having previously graduated from the Manchester United Academy, and he possesses terrifying straight-line speed.
It's game-changing speed.
But what really stands out in his profile is that out of the entire 26-man squad heading to the World Cup, Chong is the only player who was actually born on the island of Curaçao, right there in Willemstad.
It adds a deeply poetic layer to the squad dynamics. And tactically, Chong brings a physical attribute that the rest of the squad simply lacks. He brings elite, Premier League-level acceleration and 1v1 dribbling ability. His low center of gravity allows him to receive the ball on the half-turn while under pressure, immediately bypassing the first defender. So when Curaçao is forced to absorb immense pressure deep in their own half, Chong is the outball. He is the singular player capable of taking possession near his own corner flag and single-handedly driving the ball 60 yards up the pitch to relieve the defensive siege.
And during the CONCACAF qualifiers, when they were the dominant side, Advocat utilized all these pieces in a very traditional, expansive 4-3-3 formation. Because they were facing teams like Barbados and Bermuda, Comenencia could push a little higher, the fullbacks could overlap, and Chom could isolate his defender in the final third.
Yeah, they were able to dictate the terms.
Exactly. They used their Dutch technical foundation to dictate the geometry of the game. They held the ball, methodically moved it from side to side, and waited for the opponent's defensive block to lose concentration.
And it was highly effective regional football, relying on technical superiority, winning the midfield physical duels via the Bacunas, and executing lethal set pieces is a guaranteed formula for dominating CONCACAF minnows.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting, dominating regional qualifiers against part-time professionals is an entirely different universe than stepping onto the pitch at a FIFA World Cup against the absolute apex predators of the sport.
A completely different universe.
We've spent time admiring the engine and the chassis of this team, but when you subject this vehicle to the wind tunnel testing of global elites, the cracks in the hull become terrifyingly apparent.
Yes, the vulnerabilities are significant, and they were starkly, almost violently exposed during their pre-tournament preparation phase. The most glaring systemic weakness this Curaçao squad possesses is their inability to process and bypass sustained, high-intensity pressing from top-tier European or South American opposition.
I was actually analyzing the footage from their late May 2026 friendly against Scotland at Hampden Park. Now, Scotland is a rugged, well-organized team, but they aren't exactly Brazil.
No, they're not.
Yet, the way that match unfolded perfectly illustrates the fatal flaw in Curaçao's possession game. The script actually started brilliantly for the Blue Wave. In the 17th minute, Tahith Chong utilized that exact transitional pace we just discussed, isolating a Scottish defender and burying a brilliant early goal.
Right.
They went up 1-0 in a hostile environment. But then, Scotland recognized the structural weakness and completely changed their approach.
Scotland recognized that if you allow the Curaçaoan center backs time on the ball, their Eredivisie training takes over and they will just pass right through you. So the Scottish manager instructed his midfield, players like John McGinn and Scott McTominay, to execute a suffocating high press.
And they were relentless.
They began hunting the ball aggressively in Curaçao's defensive third. They triggered the press the exact moment the ball went wide to a fullback, immediately cutting off the central passing lanes to Comenencia.
And the result was catastrophic. The Curaçao defenders, who just are not accustomed to making split-second decisions under that level of physical duress, began panicking.
Yeah, you could see the panic set in.
They rushed their clearances, they misweighted passes into the midfield, and they constantly turned the ball over in highly dangerous areas. Scotland relentlessly punished those errors, scoring 4 unanswered goals and ultimately handing Curaçao a bruising 4-1 defeat.
It wasn't just a loss, it was a total systemic collapse under pressure.
Exactly.
And that match highlighted another compounding issue, a severe lack of squad depth. Advocates' reliance on experienced veterans ensures stability, but it creates a massive physical drop-off when those starters begin to fatigue.
Because pressing takes so much out of you.
Right, chasing the ball and making desperate defensive recoveries under a high press burns an immense amount of physical energy. If Shanino Bacuna or Levano Comenencia are exhausted by the 70th minute, the drop in quality to the players coming off the bench is severe.
That stubborn reliance on veterans really shows up in the squad selection, too. I noticed Advocate completely left out Jordi Paulina. Paulina is a 21-year-old rising star who looked electric in qualifying. He literally scored a brace in a 46-minute cameo against Bermuda.
Yeah, it was a surprise to many.
But Advocate left him at home. He clearly prioritizes a 34-year-old who knows exactly where to stand defensively over a 21-year-old who might score a brilliant goal but could also miss a critical tracking assignment.
It is the ultimate manifestation of risk aversion. Advocate knows that a single missed defensive assignment at the World Cup level results in an immediate goal. Furthermore, the physical fatigue we mentioned leads directly to another major vulnerability, which is disciplinary risks. Curaçao plays a highly aggressive, physical brand of football. Look at their fullbacks, specifically Sharandi Sambo. During the qualifying campaign, Sambo averaged an astonishing 4.8 tackles per 90 minutes.
Which is incredible output against regional opponents. But when you translate that aggression to the World Cup stage, the context changes entirely. If Sambo lunges into a tackle against a tricky world-class winger like Germany's Jamal Musiala right on the edge of the penalty box, Musiala is going to draw the foul.
Every single time.
Suddenly you are conceding incredibly dangerous free kicks, and Sambo is picking up yellow cards, completely neutralizing his ability to defend aggressively for the rest of the match.
Exactly. The margins for error just vanish. Knowing all of this, knowing they will turn the ball over against a high press, knowing they lack the depth to run for 90 minutes, and knowing aggressive tackling in the final third is a liability, Advocate has to completely rewrite the tactical blueprint.
He has no choice.
The open, expansive 4-3-3 possession game they utilized in CONCACAF is going to be locked in a drawer. If they attempt to play an open passing game against the teams in their World Cup group, it would be tactical suicide.
So when I watched the tape of their recent closed-door preparation sessions, you can see the drastic shift. They are completely abandoning the ball. The tactical blueprint indicates they're shifting into a hyper-disciplined, highly compressed, low-block 4-4-2, or perhaps a deeply conservative 4-5-1.
Yeah.
The distance between their center backs and their midfield line has shrunk to maybe 10 or 12 yards. It is a completely compressed horizontal shape.
And that compression is the entire philosophy of the low block. By keeping the lines that tight, You deny the opponent any space to operate between the midfield and the defense. You concede possession entirely.
You just let them have it.
Right. You allow the opposing center backs to pass the ball sideways on the halfway line all afternoon if they want to. The sole objective is to deny vertical penetration through the center of the pitch and to protect the penalty area at all costs.
Wow.
You suffer without the ball, you stay incredibly compact, and you function like a tightly coiled spring. You absorb the pressure, storing that potential energy, waiting for the opponent to overcommit or make a sloppy pass. And the exact millisecond you win the ball back, that spring releases. You launch a direct vertical pass into the channels for Tahith Chong or Asante Hansen to chase on the counterattack.
I just want to pause and consider the immense psychological discipline required to execute that shift.
It's massive.
I mean, put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine you're Leandro Bacuna or Eloy Room. You've spent the last 2 years as the big dogs in your region. You've held the ball for 60% of the game, dictating the tempo, expressing yourselves technically, generally having fun out there.
Right.
Now you arrive at the pinnacle of your career. The entire globe is watching. And your manager looks you in the eye and essentially says, do not try to play football. Sit in your own penalty box. Let them dominate you. Suffer, chase shadows for 80 minutes, do not break formation, and pray we get one counterattack. How hard is that mental shift?
It is the hardest mental shift a professional footballer can make. It requires suppressing every attacking instinct they were taught in the academies. But it is absolutely mandatory because the reality of their draw means any attempt at expansive football will be ruthlessly punished. The teams waiting for them in Group E are not going to be forgiving.
Well, that brings us directly to the lion's den. Let's break down the exact stakes of this challenge, opponent by opponent, so we understand precisely what this low block has to withstand.
Because the schedule offers absolutely no runway to ease into the tournament, match day 1 sets the tone immediately.
June 14th at NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. It will be the first World Cup match in the history of Curaçao. And stepping onto the pitch across from them is Germany.
4-time champion?
Yeah, 4-time World Cup champions. They're currently ranked 10th in the world by FIFA, though several underlying analytical models rank them even higher at 16th. They are a historical powerhouse managed by Julian Nagelsmann, one of the most innovative tactical minds in the sport. So what specific mechanisms is Curaçao facing here?
They're facing a sophisticated tactical machine designed specifically to dismantle low blocks. Nagelsmann utilizes a highly fluid 4-2-3-1 system. The entire architecture of his offense is built around creating what tacticians call half-space overloads.
Right, those pockets.
Yes, the half spaces are the vertical corridors on the pitch between the wide wings and the direct center. Nagelsmann instructs incredibly creative, technically flawless players like Joshua Kimmich, Florian Wirtz, and Jamal Musiala to drift into these pockets.
And the way Musiala operates in those half spaces is just terrifying. He doesn't just stand there, he receives the ball on the half turn, meaning he's already facing the goal the exact moment the ball touches his boot. If a Curaçaoan center back steps out of the defensive line to challenge him, it instantly creates a gap that Wirtz will exploit with a penetrating run.
Exactly. Germany's objective is to use rapid, intricate passing combinations to pull the tight threads of Curaçao's low block out of position.
Wow.
You want to make the defenders dizzy. However, the aggressiveness of Nagelsmann's system does inherently create a singular vulnerability. To maintain those overloads, Germany pushes their fullbacks, specifically the attacking left back, David Raum, incredibly high up the pitch, almost operating as a winger.
Leaving a ton of space.
Exactly. This leaves a massive, glaring pocket of empty grass behind Raum when Germany loses the ball. If Comenencia intercepts a pass in the center, the immediate instruction will be to fire a blind, raking pass into that empty channel for Tahith Chong to sprint into before the German center backs can recover.
Survive the surgical strikes and ruthlessly exploit the space behind the fullback. It's a razor-thin margin for success. Now, assuming they survive Houston with their spirits intact, they have to pack up and travel to Kansas City for match day 2 on June 20th. Their opponent is Ecuador.
A completely different beast.
Currently ranked 23rd in the world. They secured their spot by finishing near the top of the CONMEBOL qualifiers, which is arguably the most brutal, grueling qualifying gauntlet on the planet.
Without a doubt. Ecuador, currently managed by Sebastian Becachese, presents a fundamentally different challenge than the cerebral passing of Germany. Ecuador is a terrifying physical wall. To give you context on their defensive solidity, in 18 qualifying matches against South American juggernauts like Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil, Ecuador allowed a total of 5 goals.
5 goals in 18 games. That's
They
insane.
are almost impenetrable.
They're anchored in the midfield by Moises Caicedo, who covers just an astonishing amount of ground, and at the back by William Pacho, who is dominant in the air. Up top, they rely on the veteran Ener Valencia, who remains an incredibly clinical finisher inside the box.
And Ecuador does not need to dominate possession to defeat you. They are perfectly comfortable letting the game become a chaotic, physical brawl. They outwork, outrun, and outmuscle their opponents. For Curaçao, breaking down Ecuador's defensive block will be nearly impossible because Ecuador's athletes are significantly faster and stronger in the recovery phase.
So what's the plan there?
Curaçao's best hope in this match relies entirely on Juninho Bacuna delivering a flawless set piece.
So a cerebral machine in match 1, a physical wall in match 2, and then for the final group stage game on June 25th in Philadelphia, they face the Ivory Coast. Ranked 34th in the world, they arrive as the reigning African champions, managed by Merce Faye.
The Ivory Coast, the Elephants, combine immense physical power with terrifying transitional pace, particularly in the wide areas. Their midfield is marshaled by Franck Kessié and Ibrahim Sangaré, two players who dictate the physical terms of engagement with pure athleticism.
Right.
On the wings, players like Amad Diallo provide explosive, direct running. They navigated their entire CAF qualifying group completely unbeaten.
I was actually looking for a weakness in their profile, and the sources indicate their main vulnerability is tactical volatility. Like, they're prone to occasional, inexplicable lapses in defensive concentration, especially if the game state becomes highly chaotic and unstructured. So if Curaçao can drag them into a messy, transitional game, openings might appear. But attempting to match the Ivory Coast stride for stride in a track meet will take a massive physical toll on a Curaçao squad that will already be deeply fatigued, playing their third high-intensity match in just 11 days.
And fatigue will be the defining factor in that final match. A low block demands relentless mental concentration. 1 second of physical exhaustion leads to a half-step delay in closing a passing lane, which immediately results in a goal at this level.
Looking at this gauntlet, Germany, Ecuador, Ivory Coast, I pulled up the latest numbers from Polymarket and the Global Sports books because I want to lay out the harsh mathematical reality of these betting lines because it kind of strips away all the romance.
The odds makers are rarely romantic.
No, they aren't. Germany is an overwhelming favorite to win the group, heavily juiced at odds of -210 to -325. Curaçao, meanwhile, is priced as an astronomical long shot. To win the group, they are sitting anywhere from +12,000 to +20,000. But even more telling, just to place a prop bet on Curaçao simply to qualify for the knockout stages, meaning they managed to scrape by in second place or advance as one of the top third-place teams. The payout is 7.69 times your money. The global betting syndicates are essentially declaring that advancing would require divine intervention.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the advanced mathematical predictive models are entirely aligned with the bookmakers. The vast majority of simulations project 0 points for Curaçao in this group stage. 3 matches played, 3 losses recorded.
Ouch.
But when evaluating their prospects, the tactical reality of Advocate's low block severely alters the context of how those losses might look. Because Curaçao is going to sit incredibly deep and prioritize defensive survival above any attacking ambition, they are designed to keep the match lines extremely tight.
Right, limiting the damage.
By minimizing the space available, they drastically reduce the surface area for catastrophic errors. They're not going to step onto the pitch and get blown out 8-0.
That makes total sense in the context of their strategy. They might lose to Germany, but they're going to make it a frustrating, grinding 1-0 or 2-0 defeat rather than a humiliating spectacle.
Exactly. And defining success for Curaçao requires shifting your perspective. The true objective for this federation at this specific tournament is not necessarily winning the World Cup or even advancing out of the group stage.
What is it then?
The ultimate goal is securing a historic, singular point, managing to grind out a gritty draw against one of these global giants and establishing a baseline of competitive respectability on the world stage.
It's like stepping into the ring with 3 heavyweight champions. You know, you might not win the belt, but if you can go the distance without getting knocked out, you've won the moral victory. You honestly think they can pull off a draw?
Executing a draw against this caliber of opposition requires a perfect, almost miraculous confluence of events. It requires Eloy Room to produce the finest shot-stopping performance of his career. It requires the Bacuna brothers to flawlessly execute a set-piece routine.
Right.
And most importantly, it requires 0 defensive lapses, absolute unbroken concentration for 90 uninterrupted minutes. Statistically, it is highly improbable. But the beauty of football, particularly when a team commits entirely to a disciplined low block,
Yeah.
is that a 0-0 draw is never structurally impossible.
And that improbable mathematical sliver of hope is what brings the entire incredible narrative arc of the Blue Wave together. I mean, we are talking about a tiny island of 150,000 people, a population smaller than many mid-sized suburban towns, actively stepping onto the pitch to battle the undisputed giants of the globe.
It's just remarkable.
And the cultural pride radiating from the island back home is absolutely spectacular. In the research, we came across the hit song Mama Wa by the music artist Gian, which has essentially been adopted as the unofficial anthem of the team. The streets of Willemstad are painted blue.
The atmosphere must be electric.
Oh, totally. There are an estimated 3,000 traveling fans expected to make the massive journey to Houston just for that opening match against Germany. The island is practically shutting down its economy for the duration of the tournament. I was incredibly moved by a quote from Captain Leandro Bacuna reflecting on the emotional weight of the night they finally secured qualification. He said, "I think God was with us that night. It was a story written for us."
It represents the absolute pinnacle of
Yeah.
sporting romance. But it is crucial to remember that this romance was engineered. It is a testament to sheer, pragmatic organizational intelligence and brilliant geopolitical maneuvering.
Which is exactly why a story like this matters so deeply, even to a listener who might not have a single personal connection to Curaçao or the Caribbean. We are currently living in an era of global football that feels increasingly monopolized.
Heavily monopolized.
It's dominated by massive super clubs, entirely predictable national powerhouses, and staggering financial disparities. The same wealthy countries with the largest populations always seem to dictate the terms of the sport. But Curaçao proves that if you possess incredibly smart organization, if you ruthlessly maximize your unique historical and demographic resources,
And have a baseline of pure belief.
exactly, you can still violently disrupt the established status quo. They found a brilliant structural loophole to compete on a stage where the traditional math insisted they shouldn't even exist.
And observing their success leads directly to a much larger, potentially paradigm-shifting question for the future landscape of international football.
I'm intrigued.
Curaçao's triumph, using this highly specific diaspora model, merging elite European academy infrastructure with deep-rooted Caribbean cultural identity.
Yeah.
It isn't just a heartwarming, one-off underdog story to be enjoyed and forgotten.
Right.
It operates as a highly effective, demonstrably replicable geopolitical blueprint. If you look around the globe, there are numerous small, developing nations that possess massive, football-obsessed diasporas living in Europe or South America.
That's true.
If those nations study the FFK's methodology, bypass their own domestic infrastructural limitations, and successfully replicate this exact recruitment model, could we be witnessing the early stages of a permanent disruption to the traditional, deeply predictable hierarchy of international football?